everyone, I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and welcome to an antic-free 80th episode of the weekly Ratchet. In the past couple of episodes, I've been a little all over the map. I've been a little tired, I've been a little wired, I've been a little crazy. We're going to keep this one straightforward, simple. Let's just talk about some board games, shall we? Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. As always, I hope you've had a fantastic week of getting to play some games with family and or friends. I am still tired. I'm still running on like 4 hours of sleep, but it's okay. I've got my coffee. I've been a little busy here this morning, so I've got the blood flow going. I'm feeling pretty good. There's been a lot going on. We're still house shopping. I've got some things going on at work. It's just blech, but whatever. Hey, you know what? I've been playing a ton of guitar lately. Having a lot of fun with that guitar I got from the Mariana's Trench concert. You can check the last episode out to see what that's all about if you missed it. But other than that, I am trying to get caught up on my backlog of video projects. So I finished my video filming for Dicey Devices over the weekend. I'll be working on that edit here early this week, making sure that that's done in plenty of time for their Kickstarter, which I think goes up in like 2 weeks. Maybe a week, something like that, but I'll be ready for that. No problem. I've still got to do a video of Ink. I had to finish my edit for the Lunar Rush expansion. I think there's one other in there somewhere. Oh, the Story Folds Wildwood game. And I even need to figure out if that's a Kickstarter or if it's just a review. I don't really know. I might just even do a sort of a live playthrough of the prologue to kind of help people see what it is and sort of go from there, because I didn't really like it. And I don't really want to put in the effort for a negative review. Like, it's too small of a game, I think, to really worry about. Anyways, that's what I've got going on. I have one new game that has come in this week. I almost forgot about it, actually, as I was writing out my notes for this. But this came in the other day, and I actually had to laugh when I opened it up and saw what it was. I got my payment copy, I don't know what to call it, but of Taxi, the game of fair play. This was the Kickstarter by, I believe it was Mark Miller. Yes, Mark Miller. And, I didn't really love the game. I made a nice video of it just because, hey, why not? Always, of course, being clear about just what it is and what it does and what it doesn't do. But anyways, he was nice enough to send me this copy. I backed it for like $1, and I didn't even pay the shipping or anything like that. I just kind of sort of let it fade into the past, and here it is. It showed up. And you know what? I will throw props always to a designer who does something like that, who makes good on their word. He told me, he made it very clear, I'm going to give you a copy of this game. And I said, hey, you know what? Don't even worry about it. And here it is. So my props to you, Mark. Appreciate that. I showed it to my daughter. You could hear her eyes roll, but that's okay. It looks nice. I'm glad he got his dream out here. I don't think I'm going to open it. I'll probably just kind of part ways with it, but he got it done, so kudos to him. Anyways, that is Taxi, the game of fair play. Let me go ahead and get into question of the week. All right, last week I asked you your thoughts on second editions of not very old games. Now, I got a couple responses, and thought out responses for sure. I don't know. You know what? Let me get through these, and we'll kind of see what materializes. Up first was Wonderflonium, who said he likes second editions to games he doesn't own, as they improve the game by addressing flaws in the first edition. He then added that he doesn't like new editions of games he already owns, as it lessens the value of his own personal copy. Not to mention, of course, the value that then you kind of feel not obligated, but, challenged to then purchase that second edition because, well, geez, I have the game. I want the best version of that game. So now I got to buy the new, I don't gotta, but I'm challenged to buy the new game, and the game that I have is worth, because now no one wants it, right? So yeah, right? That's the problem. Yeah, I like a second edition. If I don't have it, if I do, it sucks. Josh Knight said new editions are fine if they tweak balance, improve components, or fix confusing rules, going on to explain that too many times these are released as new editions instead of expansions or upgrade kits, and as such, they often cost far too much. Yeah, sometimes even cost more than the original game. And absolutely, it's like, well, yeah, here's just a new game. Hey, we made this maybe a year ago. Now here's the fixed one. And that makes me feel like I'm the guinea pig. Okay, hey, I bought your first one just so you could kind of like have some extra money to actually then make the good one. That's the part that gets me. Viper86 said he's okay with new additions if an upgrade kit can be purchased so that original customers don't get forced to buy the new edition. And of course, yeah, I don't think force was the word that he used. I just kind of paraphrased there, but I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 games in recent memory that has done the upgrade kit. Too many times I've seen this as just a new game. In fact, I feel like the upgrade kits have occurred less and less in the more recent, when I say years, I mean, I literally mean the past year and a half. I just don't see these upgrade kits anymore. Red Panda Games said he hasn't seen this happen very often, and when it does, there are usually upgrade packs. He mentioned the second edition of the game of Parks being one where the second edition was far better than the original, and he was able to sell his original copy for a great price. Man, I don't know how you pulled that off. I sold my original edition of Parks just, literally coming right out of the Dice Tower Retreat, and I think I got half with shipping of what it cost me to buy that thing. And that's one of those games where I have just sort of refused to buy the new edition. Because for one thing, I just didn't like the original game that much. I felt like it was too dependent upon the symbols on the cards. You didn't really get to appreciate the art of the cards. And maybe it's better, but I think I'd at least have to play it before I buy it. I just haven't even seen it anywhere being played. I've seen it plenty of places for sale, but I've never seen it being played. Brandon Graham said that a second edition means that the publisher acknowledges something was lacking in the original edition. He went on to say that they aren't obligated to fix the game, nor is he obligated to buy the new edition. He also added that an upgrade kit is usually the best bargain. And you're right. It's usually an admittance that, hey, the first game wasn't that great. So screw you to all the customers who already bought this game from us. Now we're going to make a new edition and we're going to try and sell it all over again as a new game. We're going to brag about how great we've made the new game. This is the definitive edition. In fact, Parks was the one that did that. And the wording of it really, really upset me. I mean, they literally said, like, this is the best version of the game. Why didn't you make it like that to begin with? Why did I have to sort of fund you to make something that you admit wasn't good? And I mean, literally, like you're saying, nice job, stupid. Now buy the new one. Ha! You can tell this is a topic that I'm a little passionate about. Anyways, Omar Hernandez said gamers should expect second editions in our hobby, that demand will encourage reprints, and depending on the quality of the publisher, it may be a good time to update or correct flaws from the original game. He added that he might be a bit jealous if he already has the original game, but that he'd rather see the game and the publisher thrive and hopefully be able to produce more games in the future. And the thing is, I would agree with that. But again, I'm talking about recent games that are a year old, maybe even less, already getting new editions and not reprints. Just, hey, here's a new game, very, very similar to that game. Pretty much, maybe a reskin, maybe some new art, something like that. Boom, here's a new game, $80 retail. And I had to look this up. Omar talked about, seeing the publisher thrive and maybe coming out with new games. I looked up the designer of Everdell. The designer of Everdell has made 24 games. 22 of them contain the name Everdell. And some of them are just like promo packs or, little upgrades, the component upgrade, something like that. But they only have 2 games that aren't Everdell. They did not do very well. They're not scored very well on BGG. Everything else is just another Everdell rubber stamp cookie cutter game. CR Poll said that sometimes you might not want to wait as long for a game to get fixed, and also suggested that there's a difference if a $15 game from Button Shy gets upgraded versus a game that costs $100. He also suggested the added value of an upgrade pack. Yeah, and a lot of these comments talk about upgrade packs. I don't see upgrade packs anymore. Button Shy has never done an upgrade pack. They just make another $15 game. But you're absolutely right. If it's a game that cost me $100 and suddenly there's a new $100 version of that game that looks awfully similar, what is that telling us, right? Lastly, Jeremy Brooks lamented the story of Quacks, which after the base game and 2 expansions, then released a big box edition and then completely revamped the game with, quote, shitty art. He added that he's all for game companies making money, but this one felt like a blatant cash grab. Now, I will say this, like, Quacks is 7 years old. You mentioned that in the comment. I'm less flustered with a game that's 5, 6, 7 years old getting a revamp, although you are right, that did come right after the big box edition, which wasn't necessary because all the expansions fit in the original box with 3D printed upgrades, and I know that because that's exactly what I got rid of a couple of years ago, was the base box, which had everything in it, including upgrades and trays and everything that I had made. And, you know, again, it's this idea of what about when it's a new game, when it's a game that's hot off the presses? And so I looked up some of these, and maybe my opinions are a bit skewed. Maybe sometimes I have to wonder if I'm misinterpreting the time frame between previous editions. So like I mentioned the Everdales, the Far Shore game came out in 22. The Winter Frost came out last year, 24, and now they've already announced, or actually I think it's a 25. I think I'm off a year. I think that Far Shore came out in 23. The Winter Crest or Silver Frost, whatever it was, came out in 25. Now they've announced this Emerald or whatever it is coming out next year. Again, very, very same game. You're building a tableau of 15 cards. It's worker placement. You're getting resources, efficiency puzzle, that kind of whole 9 yards. Different setting, different art, maybe a little tweak to the rules. Here's a new $80 game. Brass, there's another Brass that's been announced, although the previous Brass is older than I realized. What I thought was weird with Brass was that it's not the same designer. I mean, Martin Wallace has credit on it, but it's a different designer, which feels very cash grabby. It's also going to Kickstarter. The number 1 game on BGG has a new version coming out that's going to Kickstarter. That's very cash grabby. The Ukabakoya company, who I've usually had a lot good to say about, is actually just about to wrap up a Kickstarter of what they're calling the Garden Trilogy. It's got Dino Garden, Sky Garden, and Aqua Garden. Aqua Garden is already out. You can already get that one, although it's hard to come by. And the Dino and Sky Garden versions are basically the same game, different skin, different like setting themes, but they even say that they're pretty much the same game with just a slight tweak to some of the mechanisms, slightly different resources between the 3 games. I'm like, why in the hell would I buy 3 very similar games at the same time? I mean, of course, granted, the Kickstarter took off. It's huge. I'm making a ton of money. We're kind of supporting this, right? We're letting this happen. There's an Ark Nova 3 edition, which is just ridiculous. There's the Wishland card game, which Wishland was already a card game, and Wishland just came out last year, and now they got the card game coming out, I think this year, maybe early next year. And then the one that also recently caught my attention was Dawn of Pangaea, which is a remake of Forests of Pangaea, which is a game I really liked, although it did not make any buzz. Now they're coming out with a second edition of the game. The player boards look almost identical. The gameplay looks fairly identical. All the actions look to be named the same. The tiles are now 5 spaces instead of 4 spaces. That's the major difference that I could tell. Everything else looks to be the same. And whereas the base game had you stacking these trees and using them for different powerful effects, the base game just gives you the trees. It's now the new expansion, the day 1 release expansion that adds the ability to stack these trees. And it's one of those things where, again, this just looks like a company saying, hey, let's throw a fresh coat of paint on this game that's 2 years old and try and make a couple $1,000s more off a Kickstarter. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm just going to set out on this one. And that's the thing that's just irritating me. I want to see new games. I give a lot of, gripe to Dave Beck and Paverson Games with Distilled. Luthier, which I'll talk about here in a moment, is his newest one, which I liked better than Distilled. But at least those games are wildly different themes. A theme on making liquors is not a game we really have in the hobby. A game about making musical instruments certainly has never existed before Luthier. And so while maybe I don't love the systems, maybe I think the games are maybe a little overbloated, a little overblown in terms of popularity, just the sheer fact that we have themes that have never been explored before in the hobby is certainly something that I can't, talk down upon, as opposed to the third Brass game. Yay. The fifth Everdell game or more, whatever. Yay. 3 of the same games coming out at the same time. What? Like, at what point do we just sort of stop saying, oh, yeah, I need this, and say, you know what, come back to me when you got something that's actually good. That's it for Question of the Week. Let me go ahead and tell you about some games I have played recently. All right, well, I've gotten to play a couple of games in the past week, but not as many as I have been. In fact, my October numbers are way behind my September numbers. My buddy Daniel could not come out this past week. He had some work stuff going on, and my family is we've just been all over the place. So even my wife and I did not get to play anything until last night. But I did get together with my friend Ricky, who invited a couple folks over Friday, and he actually wanted to check out the game of Luthier. I left my copy over in the car, so I'll just throw the image up here on the screen. But this is, of course, as I just got done mentioning, the newest game from Paverson Games. And it is a game about making musical instruments. It is a worker placement game with this idea that you're kind of bidding on the turn order of each of those individual worker placement locations. So you have a couple of little tokens with numbers on them. You're placing those tokens face down into each space to, sort of say, okay, I'm going to take this action, maybe even more than once. And then players will pick a location, you'll resolve all those tokens, and the strength of the tokens that you place there will determine how soon in that order you get to take that. Basically, you then rearrange those tokens based on their values that the highest numbers go first. So you may be the first person to put a token there, but you could even end up going last if you put a very low number in there. The other thing about this is that and I think I mentioned this last time I talked about it, is it reminds me a little bit of the Carnegie game in that, okay, in your mind, you're thinking, I need to do this, and then I need to do that. Maybe I've got a bunch of money, but I don't have enough resources, so I want to get to the market. I want to be able to buy some stuff that I need, and then I want to go and try and repair this instrument with those resources I just picked up. Except for that, if someone's going before you in the overall turn order, they get to pick which location activates, and they say, well, I'm going to go ahead and repair instruments. If you've put your token there, which of course you would have had to have if you knew you wanted to do that action, you now have to work that space, even though you have not had a chance yet to go to the market. There is no ability to say, hang on, I'm going to wait and come back and do that later. You have to do that when that space is triggered. And so I had a couple times in this playthrough where, again, I had that sort of flow planned out, and then someone triggered a space before I was ready, and I just completely wasted an action, was not able to do what I needed to do. And so that was a little bit frustrating. I also got to see a bit more of the randomness of this game, a bit more of essentially luck in how things are triggered, in how things come out of the decks, and all of that. So you have a character that you pick at the beginning of the game. That character is going to give you some starting resources, maybe a slight change to the way your game starts. It doesn't typically give you a unique ability throughout the game, but it may just say, hey, you start a space up on this track, which maybe unlocks a new ability for you. My character actually gave me one of my extra family pawns 2 rounds before anyone else would get it, which was nice. That meant that in the first 2 rounds of the game, I got an extra action over everybody else. Didn't help me because my buddy Ricky got a starting character that said, you just get a ton of money. You don't get any starting resources. You just get a ton of money, and you then get to take a market action right away before the game even starts. And he was able to buy more resources than any of us started the game with. And because you get one instrument to start the game with, you draw 2 random cards from the deck, you pick one of them, and that's the one that you start off with. Well, one of the ones that he started off with was sort of like a legendary instrument, these instruments that are kind of slightly higher value than all the others. And they're usually either maybe very old instruments, sort of historical stuff that aren't really used today, or even some sort of fictional, or maybe not fictional, but instruments based on sort of other games, like the Ocarina from the Zelda games, is what I was trying to get to. And so he got one of those, to start off the game and a ton of resources. And there was a sort of an in-game goal to get one of those instruments made, or to have a variety of those elite instruments. And so right off the get-go, he was heading down the path of a whole bunch of great things just by the random deal of starting stuff. And clobbered us in score. I mean, lapped the board, got way ahead of everyone. I think I did catch up fairly well. I actually came in second place in a 3-player game, which even I was surprised by. But there were so many times I felt hamstrung by, okay, my patron needs me to repair a string instrument, and there's just none out here. I did, for the first time ever, perform a song, which is another element of the game that I think is weird, because we're supposed to be instrument makers, and yet we're trying to perform music. We're trying to... other elements where, you're trying to compete to be the first chair in the orchestra, which, again, an instrument maker would not care about. So I do still like the theming of the game. I do overall still like the game, but it showed a few more of its weaknesses to me in this recent play. And who knows, maybe after a couple more plays, I may just decide, hey, I'm done with this. It's just not for me. I definitely don't like that randomness that can come out just in the way that the cards are dealt, especially since we played 3 players. The bottom 2 markets where you're repairing instruments or you are performing pieces of music, there's one less card to choose from. You only get one card that's basically free. Every other card that's out there costs significantly higher amounts of either money or these inspiration tokens, which are a little hard to come by as it is. And so, again, like, you're sitting there and it's kind of like, you've got to thread the needle just right to get the things done that you need to do. And maybe the other players, what's out there is exactly what they need, and what's out there is not what you need. And so you just feel stuck. And I felt stuck a bunch playing this game. And I think just the fact that I had a little bit of experience having played it before gave me a very, very slight edge. But again, it did not compensate for just the sheer luck of the draw that other players at the table had. So anyways, that was Luthier. Still a very pretty game. I have to give it that. Also takes up a ton of table space. All right, so that was Friday. On Saturday, and it actually took place Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I only went one day. But there was an event over in Williamsburg, Virginia, which is about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes from me. And it's called BurgQuest. I had never heard of it, but apparently it's been going on for a while. I actually saw a flyer while I was sitting at a brewery over there in Williamsburg just a couple of weeks ago and decided to look it up. And this is a kind of a gaming event. Calling it a convention might be a strong term, but I think that's kind of what they're aiming for. And I think they did a pretty decent job. This takes place at I believe it's William and Mary College out there in Williamsburg. It mostly took place in this Sadler Center building, a sort of a student union building that's there, maybe a classroom building there on campus. Really nice place, by the way. And they had some little music groups playing. They actually had a little market area in this sort of large convention space. They had some panels. They had some speeches, presentations that were going on. They had a bunch of RPG themed stuff, which I did not go and check out. And then they had a large gaming room. I got just a couple of pictures from this event, actually, as I was leaving on Saturday. And it was just a nice setup. The library that they had there was decent. I was actually surprised they had like 3 copies of Arcs, which I was surprised by. A couple of copies of Arc Nova, like 3 or 4 copies of Wingspan, to the surprise of no one. They had some older stuff, but they had a fair amount of some of the new hotness games, and I was fairly impressed. What was a bit of a bummer is now I got there as soon as it started, which was surprisingly noon on a Saturday. I'm not sure why I didn't start sooner, the open gaming area, but I set up, had just kind of my game sitting there. I had a players wanted sign, and I waited for 45 minutes to finally get someone to join me. And I was getting a little nervous because there were a lot of couples. I saw a lot of people come in, sit down together, play a game. I did not see a lot of, oh, hey, let's go join that person. I didn't see a lot of people come in by themselves. I was really surprised by a guy sitting behind me who had Eclipse Second Dawn sitting out and managed to get 3 single players to sit down quite quickly and start playing that game. I was surprised by that because that's usually a daunting game to get into. But anyways, I finally, to try and lure folks in, I set up my copy of Orbit, which of course is a very colorful, pretty game sitting on the table. And I did manage to hook 2 folks who came in, a couple And we sat down to play this. I've talked about this a couple times here already. I won't go super deep into it, but it is a simple racing game where you sort of start on a home planet. And you have to move about this galaxy board. You have to visit every other planet in this galaxy and then get back to your home planet. And the first person to do that immediately wins the game. And you're doing all this with a simple card play mechanism. You have a couple of cards in your hand. You can increase your hand size to give yourself a little extra flexibility. And you're playing a card to move those planets along their orbits, move your ship along all these little triangular spaces, possibly recharging some energy, batteries on your ship, which lets you move a little further. And that's basically it. Some of these planets will give you some special abilities like increasing those hand sizes. There's also sort of a linear accelerator, which just jettisons your ship across space. And there's a couple of variants in this, and this is probably the bit that I'll talk about for just an extra second. There's a variant where each player gets 3 little single-use tokens. They can use one to immediately fill up their battery supply. They can use one to wipe all their cards and draw a new hand. And they can use one to jump to any wormhole on the board immediately. There's also a variant where you can, if you fully upgrade your battery on your ship, you actually replace your battery tokens with this big rocket engine looking thing. And then anytime that you would gain a battery, instead of using batteries, you just get to use it like that linear accelerator and jump anywhere across space that you want to. We decided not to use that variant. There's another variant that adds in these extra cards. The cards usually give you a lot of movement, 4 spaces of movement, but they'll also let you reverse the direction of any planet along its orbital route. And they give you these little blocker tokens that they have a name. I don't remember what they are. But they place out on the certain spots where the planets would orbit, and a planet would skip that spot anytime it comes around. It's also a space that then no ship can ever land on. And I have never seen so many of these come out on the board. We had almost a dozen of these littered all over the board, and they block your movement even when using those linear accelerators, which made it very difficult to get around, especially in the end game. The one player, Sarah, was just putting these things out everywhere. She just got a bunch of the cards, and she used the cards, and of course each one let her put out a blocker. It wasn't really a strategy she was going for. It just was sort of a consequence of her getting a lot of these cards. And all of a sudden we're sitting like, holy crap, we can't go anywhere because these things are just all over the place. We had planets that would just jump over huge sections of their orbit because so many of the spaces were blocked off. And then there was one other variant which adds this sort of, tech planet or an ice planet. I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to be, but it is one planet that doesn't move. It just sits out there on the board. You pick a place to put it at, and it's supposed to increase the challenge of the game because since it doesn't move, you then cannot sort of utilize its movement to help you get around the space. You have to basically try and get close to it, get onto it, and then hurry up and get off of it onto another moving planet to hopefully shuttle you somewhere else that you need to be. And all that was just really, really neat. Now, the 2 folks who joined me, very nice people, and they seemed to really, really enjoy this, which was great. It's always nice to introduce games to someone who end up really, really enjoying themselves. She even said that she put it on her Amazon wish list to kind of keep an eye on it. They definitely were a lot more casual in their movement around the solar system. I kind of just played this like I'm used to playing, and I think I had visited 3 planets before any of them visited their first. They each had at least 3 planets left when I finally ended the game. We would have been there a bit longer, I think, and I kind of let one of them win. But in the interest of time, I kind of kept the game moving. But we had a good time with this. I do enjoy this game. I also love when you can kind of stack up all these pieces. I got one picture of this. At one point, we all wound up in the middle of the galaxy, all stacked up on top of each other. And then the young lady, Sarah, was visiting some planets that basically I followed right behind her. And so every move that she made, I ended up stacked back on top of her, and I kept making comments like, oh, I missed you. Why did you leave me? And it was just really, really funny. We had a lot of good laughs, and that was just a fantastic experience. So that is Orbit by Dr. Rainer Knizia. After they left, they went on to go get some food, and then I tried setting out my copy of Rock Hard 77. I did finally manage to snare somebody with that trap as well. He was an interesting young man. I think his name was Evan. He told me, I forgot immediately, that's a me thing. But he came by, he said, well, what's this? And I said, well, this is a game about trying to be the best rock star you can be, set in the 70s. You're going to have a lousy job. You're going to be trying to make your way as a budding musician, possibly utilizing the benefits of some candy along the way to enhance your ability. And he goes, oh, sure, why not? He sat down. Now, this guy was fairly young. I had to put this guy young 20s. And I'm explaining him the game. He's obviously of the, let's say, sort of D&D, lots of RPG gaming. I mean, he was wearing like a cloak. He was just kind of dressed up and was playing at another table that had some sort of an RPG setting going on with the GM screen, blah, blah, whatever. I was really surprised he came over and joined me. And so I was explaining the game to him, and he was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm just going to go ahead and go here. I was like, well, hang on, there's still a lot of rules left to teach you about how to play this game. And as I kept explaining the systems to him and what you're doing and how you're doing this and, getting your candy and going backstage and hanging out with ladies, and so much of it seemed to almost offend him. Like, he seemed very uncomfortable. And I was really I was actually sort of holding back on starting the game to give him a chance to say, I don't think this game is for me, and leave. He even made a comment once saying, I'm surprised they didn't choose to censor this a bit more. And I kind of stopped and I said, well, is that really what you would want? Is to censor a game, especially when it was designed by someone who lived this life? Like, the designer of this game was in a rock band in the 70s, and that was the life that she lived and experienced. But anyways, we did get into it. We did get through the play, and actually it went quite quick. We did just a 2-player game of this. And yeah, it was interesting. It was a fun game. I do still love the game. It was just interesting to kind of play it with someone who is maybe not used to these modern hobby games, is not used to seeing some of these themes. This is a theme that's probably a little bit more on the adult side of things. And so, just seeing his reaction as we played this was kind of interesting. Of course, he also started off a little on the cocky side, so I had to kick his butt. And I did. But that was Rock Hard 77. It was the first time I got to play with it using the 3D printed upgrades and such that I have made and acquired. So that was fun. I played one last game there at BurgQuest. I have this game, and I'm going to go ahead and put the image in the screen. This was Flamecraft, and the reason I'm going to just put it on the screen is because I actually got to play the retail copy of this game. They had some copies there in the library. I walked past a table of younger folks who were looking through the rulebook. The one gentleman had a rulebook out in front of him. The other, the girl sitting there, I think it was actually his wife, were looking through some of the cards and, obviously just kind of trying to figure things out. And I said, hey, would you guys like a teach of this? And I'd be willing to be your 4th player. And they said, yeah, that'd be great. And so I sat down, taught the game, we played it. And it was really, really fun. They obviously all know each other quite well. In fact, they are from this area. They went out there just for that event. And just, kind of getting to be a part of their antics and seeing the relationships between them and sort of playing off of some of their jokes with each other was a lot of fun. Flamecraft is an older game now. In fact, there is already a new edition of this. It's not a second edition. They added some sort of a very, very light family version of it with like a memory game element. And then there is a small expansion to Flamecraft, which we are hoping to get here in the next couple of months. But anyways, it is a worker movement game. You're visiting these different shops. You're trying to put dragons represented by little cards into these shops. You're gaining resources and then eventually using those resources to make enchantments, which are just giving you points. And there's a couple of unique cards you can get throughout the game, which will give you some in-game benefits and also, or possibly, some end-game scoring. And all that's really neat. It's a game where, as I have said before, you really have to find your opportunities. You have to be able to sort of change your plans quickly, look for other things that you can do to, snare up points and keep moving forward with your game. Because if you kind of set yourself on a path, like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, you might get left behind as new shops start coming out, new opportunities open. Some of the new shops that come out throughout the game are quite unique. They do very interesting things. We had a shop that came out where you could visit that shop, spend some money to get a whole bunch of points, or you could go to that shop if there was already money there, you could just take all the money. And so there were a couple times I kept joking with the Shelby, who was sitting on my right, she kept doing every action I was about to do before me, taking the cards, taking the money, whatever. I finally made a joke because next time I'm going to sit on your right. But it was still a lot of fun. I do enjoy this game. It's not, the kind of thing that I would run to play because it is on the lighter side of things. But I do still feel like there's enough game. There's enough puzzle there. Everyone at the table really got into it. They really enjoyed just what it does. And of course, it's a beautiful looking game. This was the first time I ever played on a retail copy. And so it had just little cardboard tokens for each of the resources versus the nice screen printed wooden pieces that I have. And I did find myself missing those upgrades just a little bit. Anyways, that was Flamecraft. I think it's by Cardboard Alchemy. The last game my wife and I played last night is I finally managed to get out our Kickstarter edition of How to Save a World. I got this at the trade there at the Dice Tower. I mentioned this was a game I did a video on. I think to this day it is my least viewed preview video I've ever made. I think the taxi game got more views than this. I'm not exactly sure how that happened. I did like it, but I just never got a chance to play the final copy. Now I have finally gotten to play that. This is a game where you are trying to save a world. The idea is that there is an asteroid hurtling towards this planet that has been discovered. You and a number of scientists have established a moon base on a moon orbiting that planet, and you're trying to find ways to save that planet and the wild and crazy species living on it from an impending doom. There are three ways to do that. Either you're going to build a laser that will destroy the asteroid on approach. You will try to build a shield that will deflect the asteroid as it comes in. And if none of those succeed, well, then you will evacuate all the creatures from the planet. Somehow, between the asteroid not getting destroyed and it punching through the shield, you're going to manage to save all those creatures before it hits. Okay, it gets a little weird there towards the end, but it's fine. The good news is that no matter what, you will manage to save the life on this planet. Now, it is a worker placement game. You have worker spots on the moon, and you have worker spots on this planet. Some of those worker spots at the end of the round will then push your 3 worker placement sort of ships to the opposite location. Sometimes you'll stay put, sometimes you'll move, and sometimes you get a little bit of control over that. Sometimes you can sort of get caught off guard by it if you're not paying attention. There's really a lot to this. There are cards that you get throughout the game. Some of them are action cards that you can basically play to take an action, although you'll pay a battery resource to do so. There are also cards that give you a boost. I really, really do enjoy this mechanism of this game. There are cards that will basically say anytime you do a particular action, you can then play that card to trigger a bonus. And in fact, if that bonus is also printed on another one of your cards, you can chain reaction these things. So you could have a card that says, okay, if you research one of those tracks, let's say the shield, you can do that. You can play this card to get a resource. And then I have another card that says whenever you get a resource, you can get an extra one of those resources. And so you can chain those boost cards in a pretty neat way. You're also getting cards that basically represent the animals on the planet. They're kind of just wild, crazy fantasy creatures. And all of them give you endgame scoring. But a lot of these cards also give you these tags. There is a lunar tag, a planet tag, and then like a knowledge or a science tag. I'm not sure what it's called. And a lot of actions on the board will say you could do things based on how many of those tags you want to spend. You don't lose the tags, you just flip them over. If you actually get the cardboard tokens on your board, you can just flip them over. Or you can discard cards that have those tags on them. You don't get any effect from the card, but you can just discard them to sort of add to the effect that you're working on. So in the last 2 rounds of the game, I used those tags to get a ton of the battery resource, which then let me keep playing the action cards I had acquired at that point throughout the game. Now, what's interesting about all this, without getting too deep into the weeds, is that of those 3 projects, the laser, the shield, and the evacuation, you actually don't know which one's going to trigger successfully at the end of the game. You don't exactly know which one is going to work. Throughout the game, every time that you advance on those tracks, you're putting little cubes corresponding to the 3 colors of those tracks, the pink, the blue, and the green. You're putting those cubes into a bag. At the end of every round, you're pulling cubes out of that bag based on the current threat level, which increases automatically throughout the game. And as those cubes come out, they go on this progress board. But as black cubes come out, they will accelerate the path of accelerate the movement of the asteroid towards the planet. And then at the end of the game, whenever the end is triggered, which is either by the asteroid hitting the planet or by getting to a certain spot on these tracks, you'll then pull a ton of cubes out of the bag, actually 10, and see if the laser succeeds. If you pull enough cubes that it fills the laser track, then the laser worked and it popped the asteroid. If it doesn't, you may shift some cubes down to the shield track, with the idea being that, okay, with the laser kind of damaged and kind of, maybe lessened the impact of the asteroid. You then pull more cubes out of the bag and see if you fill the shield track. And if you do, then the shield worked and deflects the asteroid. And if it doesn't, if that track still isn't filled, then the evacuation automatically becomes the winning project. And then you look to see which player is furthest along that research track, and they will get a bunch of points. The 2 tracks that did not succeed will also reward some points to their first and second and maybe third players, but that's it. And then any of those green cards that you have will give you some endgame scoring. What all makes that interesting is that you have no idea when the game's going to end. You may have an idea, but you don't know exactly when. In our last round, I had to pull, I think, 6 or 7 cubes out of the bag, and 6 of them were black. All but 1 of them were of the tracks. And so the asteroid, which was only maybe about 2/3 of the way on its track, slammed into the planet immediately at that point, triggered the endgame immediately, and we just had to jump into endgame scoring. I was prepared for a really big round coming up. I had a bunch of resources coming into the next round, never got to use them. And that wasn't really a bad thing. I mean, there is a interesting focus on efficiency here, because you only get 3 actions with 3 workers, but you can take extra actions with action cards, but you need a lot of resources to pull that off. And so you're sort of torn between using your workers to get resources or to keep triggering actions, and again, try to get a lot of stuff done. And I was winning on the laser track by a huge margin. I was way behind on the other 2 tracks, and so my wife actually beat me in this game, which we were both like, didn't see that coming. But it was really fun. I did enjoy it. The teach was a little trickier to get into than I remembered. But once you get into it, it does make sense. What is really challenging, I think, is just deciding what path to take. What do you focus on? What do you do? I do think that in the lower player counts, it's maybe a little less likely that the 2 projects are going to win, because you're not really contributing, don't have as many people contributing to them. And so it's probably a good idea to focus on the evacuation track and try to win that. That was my mistake, possibly. The other 2 tracks really were not close to finishing. But anyways, just a fun game. I enjoyed it. I'm glad we got to play this. I'm glad I managed to get a copy of it. And I could see this going well with most groups. It's not a hard game to teach. It's a little funky, just explaining, okay, how does all this stuff work? And then, like I said, the ending being very unpredictable just keeps things really interesting. That was How to Save a World. The last game I did play last time, I'm going to just mention this in passing, and I didn't get any pictures of this. I'll try to take a couple pictures, at least for this clip here. But I did play a quick game of Kingdom Legacy. This is a solo-only game. Does it say it's... Yeah, it just says solo. So there's really no way to add extra players to this. It really wouldn't make any sense. But it is a game where you are going to start off with 10 cards. Each card in this game has a couple different things that it provides. So some of the cards will have a resource that it provides in the top left corner. You discard that card and you get one of those resources. It might be gold, wood, stone. I know that there was like a fighting, like a sword symbol, a combat symbol, and there's probably more that I haven't seen yet. Some of the cards also have an action in the middle of the text. And so it may just say in the middle of the card that you can do something to get something, or do something to flip that card over, whatever. And then all the cards will usually have an upgrade cost, and it'll show an arrow pointing down or an arrow pointing to the right with a batch of resources. And if you spend those resources by discarding cards, by triggering effects on other cards, however you come across them, you then upgrade that card by either flipping it over or rotating it 180 degrees. And your turn ends when you upgrade a card. So your turn consists of drawing 4 cards from your small deck, drawing 4 cards from your deck, and then taking whatever actions that you want to take until you upgrade a card. So you, again, may discard a card for its resources. You may trigger the action on that card. You can also do I don't remember the name of it, but you draw 2 more cards. You just kind of keep adding cards in front of you until you finally spend enough resources to upgrade a card. That card flips or spins or whatever, and then you gather all the cards up, discard them, and draw another 4 cards and start a new turn. You do that until your deck runs out, in which case you've basically ended that round of play. You can put all the cards together, throw them in a box, and come back to it later, or you basically shuffle your discard pile into a new deck. You take, you take 2 more cards from the box, and they're in a numerical order, 0 to or 1 to 72 or 80 or 90, something like that. I mean, there's a decent number of cards in here. And you play again. You have 2 new cards in your deck, and you shuffle those in, and you play a new game. And then the whole idea is that throughout that game, some cards may tell you to destroy those cards to get new cards. Some cards may sort of change a rule or something. I haven't gotten any of those, so I don't know what's in store for me yet. And then those cards get shredded. It's a lot of destroying cards. There's actually stickers in here that let you upgrade the cards. And of course, a lot of people have already figured out ways to make the game resettable by using sleeves, putting stickers on the sleeves instead of on the cards. Of course, you don't have to tear up cards. You can just put them in the back of the box or stick them aside somewhere else and come back to them later. You can always put things back in numerical order and start the game over again if you've done it like that. But I feel like the idea of the game is basically you play through it, which I'm imagining could take a while. I played the game, I think I did 3 or 4 rounds. So, of course, I only experienced 6 or so, maybe 8 new cards. So I got up to 18 of the 80, 90 something cards that are in here. So I imagine there's a decent amount of game to this. There's also a bunch of expansions, but I don't know how they work because it's almost like you pick which cards you want to add from the expansions. There's some sort of a purge thing. I don't really understand it. So I got to check that out. There's also, as much as I understand, 3 different versions of this game. And it's just not super clear in what you need and what you don't need to be able to play it. I mean, obviously, just the base game you're fine with. But if you're one like me who you want to try and experience everything the game has to offer, I'm not exactly sure what to tell you what to buy. Anyways, kind of give you a quick sort of opinion on this. It reminds me a lot of the game of Palm Island. And Palm Island is a game where you can basically hold all the cards in your hand, and you're just using the other hand to kind of manipulate those cards, move them to the back. Some of the cards you tap to the side to give you resources. Those cards stick out from the side. And then at any point, you can spend resources by simply standing those cards back up to upgrade a card by flipping it over or rotating it. Very, very similar premise. The difference here is that you have that tableau of cards in front of you, the 4 that you start with, and then anytime you add 2 more, and any resources that you gain, first of all, you really have no way of tracking what you have. You just kind of have to remember what you have. It literally says you have to remember what you have, and then the moment that you upgrade a card, all those resources go away. Everything, like I said, you gather everything up, you put it in your discard, and you basically reset. You now have nothing. You draw 4 new cards. I did not like that as much as in Palm Island because I can spend a couple resources to upgrade a card. You don't get change. So that game, just like this game, I may have 3 stone. I have to spend 2 to upgrade a card. Well, all 3 were on that one card. So I just kind of wasted that extra stone. And this does the same thing. I needed 2 stone. I had 3. I upgraded the card and I just lose everything. I lose everything though. So in the Palm Island game, I may have used all my stone, but maybe I still have some fish, or I still have some wood sticking out the side, or some iron, whatever it was. I still have those resources, and the next card may need those. I can immediately just upgrade the very next card in my deck, move it to the back, and I continue playing. This sort of individual batch method of this game felt a lot more limiting, and at one point I was sitting there with a whole bunch of cards in front of me, because I eventually did reveal some cards, and I won't get into it, but I revealed some negative cards. That's all I'll say. And I was trying to get to a point that I could deal with them, which would permanently remove them. But I had so many cards in front of me that I knew that the moment I got one thing done, I was going to lose everything that I had. And that just felt very lackluster. It felt very wasteful to get rid of all that stuff just so I can get one card out of my deck. Although I will say that this is obviously a far longer overall experience than that of Palm Island. And so I played it for a little bit. I kind of got an idea of it. I hadn't gotten to a point really where I was supposed to destroy anything or upgrade anything. So I went ahead and just reset the game back to the starting point, and I'm going to try again, having a little bit more of an understanding, I think, of what I'm doing. I'm going to try it again. The other thing that I will say, though, real quick about this, which I definitely did not like, is that because the game lasts longer, because you're putting stuff in your discard, you're eventually shuffling, you're starting over again, you're adding more cards, and you're going to play this over many, many, many rounds. If you drop a card, or if you're overhand shuffling and a card gets flipped or knocked out, you have no idea what side that card was on. You have no idea what that card should be. And I think it actually makes an argument that I don't like, mind you, that you might need to sleeve this with sleeves that have a solid background so that you can move that card in that sleeve, so that even if the sleeve gets dropped, the whole card gets dropped, you pick it up, you know which way is up, you know which way is the front because of the way it's oriented in the sleeve. And so, I might have to go and buy a bunch of fairly expensive sleeves to be able to make sure that this game is always set correctly. And I don't love that, because for one thing, it's not going to fit in this box anymore. I'm going to need like a deck box or something to keep track of it. So I'm a little iffy on that, because I already dropped a couple cards when I played last night, and I literally picked it up. I had 3 of that card. I knew I had upgraded 1 or 2 of them. I didn't know if this was one of the ones that was upgraded. I literally had no idea what to do, and I think I set myself back in it. So that was kind of frustrating, and I don't love that aspect of it. It's a game that you've got to be far more careful with than you would think for what it does. Anyways, that was Kingdom Legacy, and that is going to inspire my question of the week for next week. I've talked about legacy games a long time ago, and here's the quick question. Do you truly play a legacy game correctly? Do you tear up cards? Do you throw things away? Do you permanently modify your game? Or are you one of those, like maybe yours truly, who tries to find a way to maintain the game that you can always put things back to the way that they were in case you want to replay it, even though you may never replay it, or at least you want to try and sell it off as a still fully playable game? That is the question for next week. And folks, that is the end of the 80th episode of the Weekly Ratchet. One quick call to anyone who has made it this far in the video. If you watch these every week, if you are one of those who looks for these episodes to come out, but you're not a subscriber to the channel, or you don't comment to Question of the Week, I implore you to please consider changing that up. Consider subscribing. Consider leaving a comment. It's not about the numbers. It's not about trying to be more popular than other channels. It's simply the fact that it is inspirational to me to see people continuing to join in on the conversation, continue to follow the channel. I'm just looking for a little encouragement. So please consider hitting that button or sending a comment. I'd love to hear from folks. I enjoy all the folks who participate, and I would love to get more conversation going on here on the Ratchet. So that's my only plea, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and I will talk to you all next week. Cheers.